Good morning. My name is Sarai Cook. I lead the National Trauma Awareness Initiative. We raise awareness around the abnormal amount and high amount of adverse childhood experiences that people that are incarcerated are involved with the legal system typically experience. So we make the link between adverse childhood experiences and trauma, and how a lot of times that leads to incarceration later in life. Today I'm here speaking with Stephanie Burton, my good friend from law school. We graduated in 2011, and Stephanie is a criminal defense attorney. I am not. I've never been a criminal defense attorney, so I wanted to bring in that voice and that experience to this conversation to get another perspective. And Stephanie, you just said you're planning some things in the future. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I've, just because I've been in the criminal justice system and I am such an advocate against wrongful convictions and mass incarceration, what I have decided to do, you can't criticize if you're not willing to change. I was very vocal about our local prosecutor's office. So I've decided in 2024 that I will be running for Jackson County prosecutor. I have also been very vocal about my feelings about Josh Hawley as our senator from the state of Missouri, and I will challenge him. I won't challenge him in 2024. It's because I want to make sure when I take on a race that big that I am prepared to give it everything that we need to give it. So I will be challenging him not in 24, but in 2030.
Oh, that's a good long-term goal.
Yes.
Okay, so I recently did a training for a judicial conference, and in my research for that training, I noticed that there are several theories behind judges and the criminal legal system, or just the legal system. There's just trying to help people get better. There's just all kinds of theories. I personally don't know what our goal is in the legal system. I know it's a little more clear to me on the civil side, just making people whole. But
Right.
On the criminal side, I really don't understand what our goal is. Do you understand after all these years of practicing?
I wish I knew. I wish I had a solid answer for that. But, I practice both state and federal. I practice, Kansas, Missouri, and I also do federal, Kansas, Missouri, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. And so having done criminal defense work in different states, it seems like the goal varies from state to state, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, from courtroom to courtroom. So, just in general, being a criminal justice major and having a master's in criminal justice, it used to be the common theme was the goal of the criminal justice system is retribution, deterrence, and rehabilitation. And where that was like kind of the overarching three goals of the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, like what I see in the courtroom is the goal is whatever the group of people in that particular courtroom think the goal is. And so it should be one uniform goal across, especially nationwide, at least see one uniform goal across the country, or at least across the state, at least across the circuit. But unfortunately, we see so much differences just from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, from judge to judge, from courtroom to courtroom. And there's not one central goal that I could say definitively as a criminal defense attorney that this is it. Now, I know what my goal is for my clients, but my goal and the government's goal or the state's goal are not always the same. My goal and the judge's goal are not always the same. And so in general, those should be the goals. Rehabilitation of the person accused, deterrence to keep people from committing crimes, and retribution so that victims feel like there has been some justice. But unfortunately, that term justice is just subjective by itself. And where sometimes justice might require an outright acquittal, other times it might require softening the blow. And there's never a situation where everybody's going to be happy, unfortunately.
Where do you think that this disconnect happened? Where do you think, how did it turn out like this?
Well, I think the way the disconnect happens is, because there's not one consistent goal. So if everybody was working towards the same thing and on the same page, then at least we'd have some kind of consistency. Like you said in civil, where the goal is to make the plaintiff whole, the aggrieved party to make them whole. And so, and in civil cases, that means money, right? That's money damages. And in the criminal justice system, it's different. And so we talk about the goal as a nation for the criminal justice system. And if the goal is to rehabilitate offenders, if the goal is to reduce crime, reduce recidivism, then that's one thing. But if the goal is to just lock up people indiscriminately for long periods of time with no expected change, and not relying on data, then we're meeting that goal very well, because that's what's actually happening. We're having situations where the only thing that we're doing is we're locking up people disproportionately, especially people that are minorities or poor. That's one thing. Being poor is one thing that transcends among every race. I mean, if you're poor, anybody can get it. The injustice will get spread around that way. But disproportionately, minorities and the poor are the ones that are treated most egregiously by the criminal justice system. And so the way we have gotten this disconnect is we have our elected officials, because people think, oh, it can't be a political thing, but really it is, because we have our elected officials that will villainize certain things and glorify other things, and think certain crimes won't be villainized until they affect, and I hate to even say it this way, but the rich white community. And until it lands on their doorstep, then it's not a problem. Just like if you think about the sentencing disparities back with the Booker case where we had.
Oh, which? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, where we had the Booker case where they overturned a lot of, they redid a lot of sentences because of the sentencing disparity with crack cocaine. And so they were more harshly punishing people for crack than for other drugs. And so now we see, like, where we have the opioid epidemic, we see like fentanyl, and we see these drugs that are killing white teenagers and affecting politicians' family. Then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this is an epidemic. Shit, it wasn't an epidemic when crack was killing our uncles and aunts. And
within that, and what I see is millions and millions, if not $1 billion coming down the pipeline from the federal government to fund programs to crack down on this.
Exactly.
No.
So what the goal is depends on what the rich and the elected officials say that the goal is. And the elected officials, and I don't even want to put it out there like that, but the elected officials' goal is whatever feeds the pockets. And so when you're, just as a person who has campaigned before, I get it kind of, because you need to, in order to get where you are to get elected, you've got to have your donors, you have to have your supporters. And there is a book that my campaign manager had me read. It was by Cicero, and it was called How to Win an Election. And it was about promising people everything and delivering nothing. And so that was the model that was used back then, where it was about you have to do what you have to do to get in the seat in the first place. And then once you get in the seat, then you owe these favors and whatnot. And so, and that's kind of the model that's still being used. And so these politicians, they are promising people everything, delivering nothing. And we have a situation where they have to, if they want to get elected again and run again, they still have to, pander to their donors. And that's why you'll see certain politicians champion certain issues, because those are the people that donate. Those are the people that are giving, and those are the people that are making a huge difference in their bottom line. So I probably went a little overboard on that one.
Well, yeah. Every time I think about why we do the things we do, why certain things are legal and other things are illegal, why we have the system that we have, it's glaring in my mind. In law school, they said, I think it was and we sat right next to each other, so you might have heard it too.
Right.
We heard that the laws are made based on the mores, the values of society, supposedly.
Right. Allegedly.
Yeah, but really, because, laws are made because of the values of the person putting in the law, making the law. And that is not necessarily representative of society.
Exactly.
So, just for example, with marijuana was illegal. It's still illegal federally, was illegal. And by the power of the people putting measures on the ballot and really fighting for it, having to really fight for it. Right. It is now legal, and now the states are selling marijuana or taxing marijuana, getting those revenues. But at the same time, all of the people that gave their life because of doing the same thing went to prison for life. Right. It affected them, their families, their kids, all their future generations, maybe if they were taken outside of the family. And now the state's doing it.
Right. It's cool when they do it. The problem
was it ever wrong? Was it ever wrong? Those are the things that confuse me. Right.
It was wrong because they said it was. It's kind of like the because I said so mentality. And it was wrong because, so like now that it's profitable to them, right? It's profitable. They are making money hands over fist doing it. Now, when it was just our uncles and cousins slanging weed and selling nickel bags, those people got prison. And these people are getting rich. The government's getting rich, where our people got prison. And some of them, and they're doing some work now to get those sentences overturned. But they're riding in on this market on the backs of the people that are now doing time for it.
So this is a complex question, though. What do you think, in your opinion, based on what you've seen, what do you think is, how could the tides turn? What's another thing that people are going to prison for right now, spending their lives in prison and ruining the lives of all their families, that the government might be doing in a few years or 10 years or 20 years?
The drug industry completely. And I am not an advocate for people selling drugs or people using drugs or anything to that effect. But, the whole thing is the government, if it's going to profit them, then, they're going to be all for it. And so they're going to do what they have to do to keep their market going, keep their supply and demand going. And so anytime you see something where there was this huge prohibition, like alcohol, you'll see this huge prohibition for so long, and then you'll see that they'll decriminalize it and the government will then profit from it. And so, pharmaceutical sales, it's always been a huge hot button issue about the high price of medicine. And so once the federal government gets a hold of these things and regulates it or just decriminalize it, then it'll be a situation where we have, just like we're seeing with the marijuana, where we start seeing that they will start decriminalizing these things, that they have incarcerated people, because believe this, people are getting life sentences on drug cases, nonviolent drug cases. We're not talking about people doing home invasions. We're talking about people who sell drugs in their community to make a living. And not that that's ever a good thing. I'm not saying that, but I do understand that people have to do what they have to do to survive when they're trying to feed their families. And so these are people who are nonviolent offenders. And I believe that, there are situations, people who are selling drugs, that there should be incarceration for them. I'm not saying they shouldn't be, but why should there be a life sentence for that? And doing criminal law, I get better sentences on violent crimes, where people have murdered people, where people have shot people, than on nonviolent drug offenses in the federal court system. I represented a father and son on two separate issues. The father sold drugs. He got 18 years in federal prison. And I had an offer for the son who killed someone for 14 years. And so it was like, well, which of those things would be the most egregious, right? In my opinion, taking someone's life is more egregious than selling a controlled substance to a willing participant who's there to buy it. Because without the supply and demand, without someone coming to buy it, you have nothing to sell. But taking somebody's life arbitrarily, just doing that because they didn't do whatever it is you felt they should have done, that should never be a situation in my mind that's offered less time than a nonviolent drug offense. So I just think and of course, one was a state crime, one was a federal crime. But the way we have treated this war on drugs, when all the science has said to the contrary, that these long sentences don't do anything, don't reduce recidivism or anything to that effect, don't provide a deterrence, we're wasting time and money locking these people up. And it's like, at the end of the day, most of them are going to return back to society, and we put such a stigma on people who have been incarcerated. We put such a stigma on people who have sold drugs, who have been a product of their environment. We put a lot of stigma on that, to where we don't want to give any financial aid to go to school. We don't want to give employment. We don't want to allow them to pursue things. And then if we do allow it, there's this long waiting period where you would think, if this person has been incarcerated for 10 years, that's just hypothetically, this person has been incarcerated for 10 years, that should be a long enough waiting period. But then they have to come out and complete whatever supervision they have after that. Then they have to wait an additional 5 years or whatever to apply to try to better their lives. And what usually will happen in that meantime, in between time, is they still have to survive. They still have child support obligations. They still have a family to feed. And they end up being forced to return to the life they know. The life that they know they can survive in, and then we're back in this repeated cycle. So I'm saying all that to say this: our system has never been designed for people to come through it and prosper. Those who do, those are the outliers. But it's never been designed for people to come out of these institutions and to go and live productive lives as viable members of society. The goal has always been to keep them crutched and keep them crippled, and to control this part of the population.
Are you seeing with your clients any threads of sort of what we talk about here, of folks coming from a lot of trauma, having adverse childhood experiences, coming from just the struggle? Are you seeing that in your clients, or yeah. These folks can't even afford to hire an attorney a lot of times?
And a lot of times that is the case. They can't afford, like, I'm private counsel, but I contract with the Missouri State Public Defender's Office to take some of their overflow cases, because I know those lawyers and public defenders get such a bad rap. Public defenders do an excellent job. They really do work hard. And the court expects them to take on more than they can bear. And so what the Missouri State Public Defender's Office has done is created a system for panel attorneys like myself, private attorneys that are willing to accept their overflow cases, their overload or conflict cases, and to represent them. And even though, none of us are going to get rich doing that, but still it is the way that we give back to the community. It is the way that we give back to the legal profession. And so most of the time, what I see overwhelmingly is a lack of education. So we have a situation where we have people who are growing up in an environment that they have to start working early. They come from families that are extremely poor, and they come from families that are, I won't say neglectful, because I don't believe they're neglectful at all. I think that a lot of times you have busy moms who are working and raising kids by themselves. And the moms aren't being neglectful, the moms are working, and they are trying to take care of their children and trying to keep food on the table and keep a roof over their head, doing the job of mom and dad to do these things. And with that, because my mom worked for the post office when I was a kid, I hardly saw the woman. She worked about 80 hours a week. And it wasn't that she didn't provide or anything like that, but she had to do those things to take care of us. There was 3 children she was raising in Southern California by herself. And so with that gave us a lot of time to do whatever. Now, Thankfully, I was a nerd and I didn't do anything. But my sister was very different than I was. My sister got involved with a gang. My sister ran the streets. My sister got involved in drugs. We had 3 kids in the same house, and one of them took a different path. But and she was the oldest. And a lot of time, what you see is where we have like communities where if you're not getting the attention you're seeking at home, the streets will give it to you. Anything you can't get at home, you can get in the streets. And I had a young man that I represented, and he wasn't from here. He was from El Salvador. And he was the third, the next to the youngest of 4 boys. So he was number 3 out of the 4 boys. 2 of his brothers had been killed in the streets by a drug cartel. And he said, when you get to a certain age, then when you're about 14 or 15, then you have 2 choices. You can either go work for the cartel or you can die. And so 2 of his brothers had been killed. And so his family tried to move him and the younger brother to the US. And so they came to the US, and surprise, surprise, the cartel is here too. And they found him and put him to work. And he was indicted. And he was, a lot of times in the federal system, your defendants are going to prosecute each other, and in essence, because they're going to proffer. But his thing was, I'm better off going to prison, because if I say something, I'm dead. If I don't do the work, I'm dead. So this is my only option. This is my only choice. And he went to prison for a long time. And so you're looking at that background, you're looking at that trauma, you're looking at the environment from which he came. And you're looking at a situation where his circumstances, even where they tried their best to change the circumstances by sending him here, the people were still here. They still found him anyway. And so we have that background that comes in. And what the criminal justice system always fails to realize is that people don't start at the same starting line. And so when we bring these people into the criminal justice system, whether they be, young, poor minorities, whether they be people from other countries, they're all coming with something. They're all coming with some kind of baggage. And then you get into court, and the judge and the prosecutor, and sometimes the defense attorney, treat you like shit. And it's really horrible, because they already feel shitty. They already feel like no one cares for them. They already feel like they don't have any choices. They already feel like they're not in control of their own life, especially when people get appointed counsel, they don't even get that choice. They don't even get to pick the lawyer that's going to represent them. And picking a lawyer is like picking a spouse. You got to feel like that person's going to be there for you. They're going to be in the trenches with you. They're going to ride for you. They're going to fight for you. And that regardless of the outcome, we fought together, we worked together to get there. And so when this is why they have a disdain for like appointed counsel, because it's one more thing they didn't get to choose. They didn't get to choose that person either that they have helping them. And even though that lawyer may have the best intentions and be trying to do the best job for them, they have a belief that this lawyer is working with the government because that's who the government appointed. So they feel like whoever the government appointed is working for them. And so you have these people coming in here where no one has taken the time to learn their story. And that's, as a defense attorney, that's my job. I got to learn these people. I'm the only one that gets the unique pleasure and opportunity of learning the defendant and who they are, who their family is, where they come from, what their story is. Because the prosecutor, they're just going to look at the crime. The judge is just going to look at whatever's presented in the file, and they don't get to know who that defendant is unless I tell them. And so they come in there with this trauma. They come in with a lifetime of people telling them they're not good enough, a lifetime of people not caring, a lifetime of feeling like they ain't shit. And then they get in here, and then they're getting sentenced opportunity to speak, to say, look, I understand you've made this mistake, especially when they're young, but you are young, you are smart, you are vibrant, you're intelligent. And yes, there has to be punishment for this. But while you're in there, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take advantage of any programs they have. I want you to learn a trade so that when you come back out and you're on probation or you're on parole or whatever you've got to come through supervised release, that you can learn a skill that's going to make you marketable. Because if you can sell drugs, you can run a business. because it's all about, I said, whether you're the business, the butcher, the baker, or the crack rock maker, it's all business. You've got to build a clientele, you've got to book a business, you got to build the business, you got to fund the business. It's all a part of the same entrepreneurial skills. But if the judges would frame it that way for them and say, if you know how to do this, and selling drugs is inherently more dangerous than selling bread or being a butcher, then you can run a legitimate business as well. You could run something. You have the skill set already in you and the work ethic, because no one's going to be out working harder than the dope man. I don't care what anybody says about the dope man. He's the only one open on Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving that's going to meet you out in the snow in the middle of the night or whatever. And so if the judges would at least pour into these people to say, you do have marketable skills and you do have marketable qualities that extend beyond what it is you think you have to do, because this is the opportunity that's provided to you in the street. But here's some things you need to do and think and focus on. Get your education, finish your GED while you're in custody. Take care of these things so that when you come out, you've got some more options. And then that has to transfer to like our parole system, our handlers that are on the outside to help them do well. But they come in, they've got mental illness a lot of times. And a lot of times when you see them on drugs, they're like dual diagnosis where they are treating their mental health issues and self-medicating with street drugs. Why? Because the pharmaceutical drugs are fucking expensive and they may not have insurance.
And I want to go back to something that you said, that there's a lifetime of people telling them all these bad things about themselves, people telling them that they're never going to be anything, because actually I experienced that myself. And I don't think people that hasn't happened to, I don't think they understand what that does to a person. Because it's never happened again. So they don't understand that the 1,000-pound weight that growing up hearing that you ain't shit, you're never gonna be shit, you're gonna end up like this and like that, and then that keeps going in your mind, and it feels like you have 1,000-pound weight on you, and it feels like you're walking through mud, and it's super easy to give up all the time, and it's a really long, hard process to get yourself out of that. And it's like, it's people that haven't experienced that, they will never know what that's like. They will never understand what that's like. They will never understand how debilitating that is. For myself, it took 20 years, little by little, doing one thing right, doing one thing that was successful. Oh, I succeeded. I never thought I would be able to do that. Oh, I didn't just get up and go to law school. I did nails. I had to finish a nails school first. I was like, oh, finish nails. I had to go and do medical coding. Ooh, I did that. I had to go and get my GED. Ooh, I did that. I went to community college. Ooh, I did. Oh, that was all right. And, it was like all these little things that I had to do just to even get the confidence to even get my GED, to get the confidence to get my associate's degree. It just little tiny step by step. And all along the way, there's always that chance to give up. It's like that. And for me, every time I was ready to give up, somebody came and told me I could do it. Right. Somebody came and I was like, thank you, God. Because any one of those times, if I hadn't had some encouragement from somebody along, if they just showed up and encouraged me, or showed up and I thought it was insurmountable. One person came and showed up and said, no, that's easy. You can do that. And I'm like, it is, so that's crazy. But people that haven't been through that, a lifetime of people telling them that they can't do anything and they won't ever be anything, do not understand what that's like. Do not understand the psychological trauma from that. So what do you think?
They don't get it, and they don't understand what a blessing it is that they don't. They don't understand what a blessing it is that they can criticize. Yeah, that they are so fortunate that they can criticize something they couldn't possibly understand. And I said I try to do an exercise with the judges, and most of the time they don't care about just trying to get them to imagine that. I mean, just trying to start a marathon and your leg is cut off. and you're not in any kind of Special Olympics. They want you to perform against people that have trained for this their entire lives, and want you to get out there and not only run the race, but win it and beat everybody else who came out without the same trauma and without the same disadvantages that you have. And that would just be one physical impairment. And then imagine that you're being beaten down and berated every day for having that impairment. And they sit there and sometimes they roll their eyes, but it's like, to be able, I wish I had the experience able to sit high and look low and just make those judgments. But at the same time, I'm glad that I don't. I'm blessed in my own right that I understand and I can empathize and I can relate to people. I can relate to someone who has had to struggle, whose family had told them, you might as well get out there and start hoeing or something to that effect because they don't feel like you can do it. Now, thankfully, I had, my mother was a hard worker, and so I learned a very good hard work ethic. And my dad was a big proponent of education. But, especially, and I know you can relate to this, like in law school, just in and of itself, the level of perfection that's in there, where people just look at you like you're stupid, and you know inside that you just can't possibly be as stupid as they think you are, because at least you got in here. But gosh, they just make you, oh boy, my law school experience, some of those people made me feel like shit. They made me feel like trash, and unfortunately, some of those people are now sitting on the bench, spreading that discouragement to other people. But it's like you get in a situation where you already feel you're somewhere you shouldn't be. Like somehow you just slip through the cracks and manage to get in and manage to get a little piece of success. And it's hard to keep driving and keep pushing. But like your testimony, your story is a beautiful one, because you are somebody who by every statistic should have failed. Mm-hmm. And for you to be able to sit in the position to where you say, yeah, and I did nails, and I went to, I got my associate's degree, then I went to undergrad, and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And I stopped believing the lies that had been fed to me through my childhood. And I stopped believing all of that. And even when you get that little bit of success, it still replays in your head. You're still fighting the same demons every day. They're still there. You have just learned how to work through them. And so for those people who don't understand it, they're so fortunate not to be able to understand it, but unfortunate at the same time, because to me, if you're going to sit in those positions, you ought to be able to relate to the people you serve. And if you can't relate to the people you serve, I don't believe you deserve to be there. So
I agree. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's no problem.
One thing I just want to touch on real quick before we wrap up. We talked about the juvenile system, and I told you a story. So I was first incarcerated in the juvenile system at 13 years old. I just had, up until that time, I just had a lot of moving around, different foster homes, group homes, problems at school. And at that time, I wasn't with my mom, and then my mom got sober. And so she joined, a 12-step program, got sober. But, now that I am a sober person, I know that it takes years and years and years. I'm a couple years now. It takes years and years and years. She got me back after 1 year of sobriety. Not at the time, I didn't know what that meant. Now I know that means you are still working through a lot of things.
Right.
So she really didn't know how to handle me. She didn't know what to do. She wanted me to be, of course, not a headache like that I was being. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know, she kicked me out. I ran away and I stole her debit card, stole $60 from her. Boom, now I'm in the system. Now I'm in juvie. Now I'm going in and out of juvie. And it honestly, it was kind of better for me in juvie, because I felt safe, because I was locked up. No one could get me. No one could get to me. It was like the same thing every day. I'm not saying that I agree with the juvenile system, but I'm saying there was no other options out there as far for me to feel safe, for me to kind of have some consistency, know that I have to do these things. There's no other systems, right? That's the only system. That's
right.
There. But I learned about a bunch of more crimes. It became being incarcerated at that age, 13, 14, 15, 16. It it began to feel normal for me. I had, so I don't know, like for me, like it's, I think about that and kids getting incarcerated and like they treat us just like we're adults. I did I did a keynote speech for the White House and Department of Justice and all these folks about juvenile incarceration. So I said, when we incarcerate children, they are our responsibility as a society. I'm a taxpayer. My tax dollars go to fund that system. And so those are my kids at this point. If they're incarcerated, those are my kids now because they're not their parents' kids. They're in my custody as a taxpayer.
Right. You're right.
And I said, there is no reason why they shouldn't have full dental. They should not leave juvie with cavities. They should not leave juvie without a full medical check. They should not leave juvie without not having a mental health diagnosis if that's what's going on with them. They should not leave juvie. Then and now, if they get out and when they get out and they go to school, there should be no fight for an individualized education plan, because now it is our responsibility to make sure that that child has an individualized education plan or whatever plan needs to be in place to make them successful. We should be teaching them skills while they're in there, teaching them about just how to communicate better. Like, what are their feelings, processing their feelings. We don't do any of that. They sit in their cell or they go to the class and throw pencils at each. That's what I did. Throw pencils at people and play volleyball. Yeah, I mean, that was the best part. But all these things that I'm learning now, and I read books and I learn about all these emotional regulation skills and relationship skills and communication skills and all this stuff that I'm just learning now. That's what I needed to know back then to stop that people, or like, we need to be teaching them their value and their worth, because if their parents aren't teaching them that, or society's not teaching them that, like, they are our kids now. So but we just send them there like they're adults. We're not looking at the circumstances. They did this crime and now I think we do that a little bit more now. I guess I'm speaking from my perspective. A long time ago when I was,
not much has changed.
Not much has changed.
No, not at all. Unfortunately, I was co-counsel on a case with a girl who was 16, and her and a group of friends robbed an old lady, and they certified her as an adult. She was sent to prison, an adult prison. And I was arguing during sentencing that this person is still a child. And the prosecutor said something that just almost broke me to tears. He said, "She's not a child, she's a young criminal." And to make that stamp on somebody that's so young, and I'm grateful that I'm not still reading the consequences of everything I did as a teenager, but to make that stamp so young, send her to an institution. I believe it was Frederick Douglass that says it's easier to educate children than to repair broken men. And if you would just take the time to invest in kids who are the future, I mean, it's like literally they are the future. If you take the time to invest in those kids, what a difference the world really could be. Because if you change those thinkers and change that mindset while they're still developing versus trying to train an old fool, you could really have a strong community of people that can inspire and change the trajectory of where we're going. So like in the juvenile system now, they call it the attorney for the juvenile officer, but essentially they're just juvenile prosecutors. They are so harsh. They are so unforgiving, and they are more harsh than the adult prosecutors. They have no grace. They are sitting there trying to put kids in DYS. Now, I understand, like, for some kids, like we were talking about how that structure was nice to have, where you had a set routine, where you knew you were doing, and you knew you were safe, because that's what home's supposed to feel like, right? It's supposed to be safe. You're supposed to have a structure. You're supposed to have a routine. You should not be worried about where you're going to wake up or where you're going to go to bed, if you're going to have something to eat. So yeah, it provides those things, and it should. But
it has an effect on their entire life.
my phone. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so but it has an effect on their entire life. There are repercussions, there are consequences, there are things that you learn in there and ways of being. You have to become hard so fast.
Right.
You cannot show your emotions. You have to stuff them down inside. You have to be ready to fight. You have to be ready to do whatever you got to do to survive. You can't show empathy and compassion and respect for others. You cannot. That is a weakness. So you learn to be like that, and then you leave there and you take that on to the streets.
Right.
And that's recipe for not being successful in mainstream society.
Yeah, and it's the Institute of Higher Learning for Criminal Activity. That's just the secondary school for criminals. I mean, that you're learning how to get better at it. You know, it's one thing for the educational piece, but then you're just there doing whatever, not getting any education because they're still not making them do school. And then you're learning how to get better at not being caught. You're learning more skills on how to do the wrong thing.
Well, Stephanie, you have a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge. I support you 100% in your races in your run for prosecutor. Then you can join the League of what is it? Professional prosecutors that are, want change.
Right, exactly. The progressive prosecutors that want change.
Yeah, I love that. I really appreciate your time today. Is there anything that you want to end this conversation with? Any pearls of wisdom?
No, just for those who are struggling or those who have kids, just continue to remember that words have the power of life and death. Speak life into them. Let them know that everything's a teachable moment. Whatever they have done, they are greater than that moment. And that understanding that it's important to be kind. It's important to be kind to people, to children, to adults. You never know what people are going through.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you look beautiful. And I'm so very proud of you.